So, up next to lead us right into the next talk, and so we've been talking all about calm. We're going to have Shane come back up. Dr. Morris is going to come back up, and he is going to tell you all about the bottle of product that you have on there and what Dr. Pompa was just talking about, and get it dialed in for you so you know exactly what's going on, and then the distinctions between the neurosyn of yesterday and the calm of today. So, without further ado, let's welcome up Dr. Shane Morris to the stage. Oh. Turn him on. Oh, check your mic on the back. Click the button. Hold on, mic check. There you go. You're good.
Yeah? Good? There we go. Perfect. Okay, so the good news is we've been able to be immersed in a little bit of calm and the use of calm and why we would want to involve this product and others, mind you, in the process. Now, once again, this is a complex issue, and it's near and dear to my heart, more so than yesterday's, because this one affects many more people in my world anyway, right? Maybe not in your world, but in my world. And I was just telling Cynthia that one of the things that I had to do, I had to take a step back when it comes to calm, because in anything that is anxiety, depression, panic disorders, and so on, you know, whether you want to understand them logically, biochemically, and how the emotion affects the brain and the neurotransmitters, those are all things we can look at and we can study and we can understand. But all of that is really not important to the person that's suffering these types of anxieties. In fact, when you think about yesterday, those brain disorders that we talked about yesterday, cognitive issues, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all those things, are one of the precipitating factors for today's talks, right? When your brain isn't doing what your brain wants to do, you're immediately going to enter into anxiety, stress, panic, and you may recognize it, you may not, but it's happening. And in a lot of families, the family sees it before the person sees it, right? They want to come up to you guys, the healers and the practitioners, and say, you know what, this my loved one is suffering. They just don't know how much. And it's a really serious issue for me, and hopefully for people you guys heal and take care of. And it's not logical. So we're going to go through today all of the logic, some of the biochemistry, some of the herbology and herbalomics, and we're going to understand neurotransmitters, how does it relate to this. We're going to look at some brain scans. All of that is wonderful. It's wonderful knowledge. It's wonderful tools for you. But I am standing up here telling you that is what those are, and those people need the help, right? And I know it. I love teaching this. And the other reason why I'm going through this process is because we are delivering you a product. So I want to go through this because I want you to understand the product, but the patient is a different approach, correct? Do you understand? So does everybody get what I'm saying? The product, we can apply the logic and the science and the emotion and the energy. The person that will be taking that product that is suffering needs a lot more and a lot of things differently, okay? So, that being said, yesterday I used this. We're going to be over here today. And we call it mood enhancement. This is my way of really, for lack of a better description, I'm compliant with regulatory agencies, okay? I can't say antidepressant, I can't say depression, I can't say this product helps all those things, because those things are diagnoses and cures, and we cannot do that in our world. So mood enhancement, anything, mood support, mood enhancement, those are the things that we're allowed to say legally. And you're allowed to say legally. It's not just me, it's all of us. And it doesn't matter what credentials you have, by the way. It doesn't matter if you're the head of the CDC or you're me standing here, you still can't make those claims with nutritional supplements. So we come up with creative ways to say what we need to say. So again, I throw this up here and I've changed some of these around, but I want to remind you that your brain is where you live, and it's still in charge of all these things, and it's still the emotional center, and it speaks to the heart, and it speaks to the adrenals, and it speaks to those things. Now, granted, it gets feedback, but once again, it speaks to the people around you, the community, the passion, the things you do. So I want us all to remember that as we go through my otherwise very much biochemical pathways and such, okay? I went backwards, sorry, wrong way. So here's my outline. On the outline, we want to do a quick brain review, a quick neurotransmitter review. We're going to look at some dysfunctions. And these are dysfunctions that are classified by various different groups. Some are going to be allopathic, some are going to be natural. For me, it doesn't matter. We know what they are. We know these terms. We know when people are suffering things. Whether you want to put it in a classification, whether you want to give it a set of symptoms and so on, that's really up to you. Statistics. Again, the statistics are to remind us that this is an important job that we have to do. Brain and the CNS threats. So I'm going to spend a lot of time going through how we want to worry about neurotransmitters and how to take care of our brain, but what I'm not going to spend a lot of time in are the threats. And the threats are ubiquitous. So I want to mention that right now, maybe touch on it a little bit as I go. The threats are, we got microbial threats, we've got dysbiosis threats, SIBO, we have food, we have emotions, we have water, we have air, we have our clothing. You know, those of you that took the tour last night, I don't know if you guys heard me because we were really winding the last of the tour. Everybody's hungry, and we were getting down to the attention span. None of us had taken Neurosyn, but we have a lot more threats than people realize. Now, I know you guys do, but your patients may not realize. One of the things we do in the laboratory is test for heavy metals, and I don't know, the places in the country that stopped using leaded gasoline the last, do you guys remember that? So it was phased out throughout the country. And those people their towns and their communities that stopped using it last, when we test things from those communities, lead is still up here, right? If you live in a community that you stopped at first, you know, again, we go to Agent Orange. When Agent Orange was stopped 50 years ago, it might be reaching levels that are now getting to the point where they're not causing major inflammatory issues. Well, lead's the same way. Lead was stopped, but in some places it was not stopped as fast. And guess where it wasn't stopped as quickly? Farming communities. Because they were able to keep buying that gasoline for their tractors and their equipment, right? So they passed it for vehicles, but other equipment, construction equipment, farming equipment. So when we tested everything from clothing, cotton, other things that are created in those last communities, the lead is outrageous. In fact, it's so outrageous that our equipment, we have to completely wash the equipment. And when I mean wash it, we're talking, you know, chemical equipment. It's real detailed and all that, because it contaminates the equipment so much that the lead just keeps coming out. It sticks to the tubing, it sticks to the pipes, it sticks to the glassware, it just is everywhere, right? So it's everywhere. We have to be cognizant of all of these things, from our environment to our behavior to our interactions, and that goes without saying. And I know you guys know all of that. And then it gets worse when you get into man-made compounds, like glyphosates and things. Those are even harder to even deal with. Nutrition, neurotransmitters, improving mood, and then there's just a brief on gut-brain. I won't spend a lot of time on that because we have done a really good job. So remember, here's our brain. It's a happy brain. We have all of the different parts of our brain that we love and really appreciate, from our visual to our auditory to our creative thinking to our moods and so on. We want to take care of this guy because this guy or girl is important to everything we do. Remember, it's made up of neurons, okay? We have neurons. And as we talk about the cell, I know this is a review from yesterday, but the cell is the cell. So when you want to improve the behavior of a cell, you can improve the behavior of a neuron because it is simply a cell. It may have some unique needs which we're providing in these products and others. I want to take a moment to say we have other products that I won't get to talk about today, but we have a product called B-Brain and Nerve. N3. I'm going to talk about N3 more today. I almost put my finger up with the N3 finger. I said B-Brain and Nerve, N3. I almost left N3 up. This one, sorry, that would have been bad. I'm not going to hit on B-Brain and Nerve, but they are beautiful, beautiful products that bathe the nervous system and the brain in nutrients, okay? So they should be used, and they can be used longer periods of time. They can be used in conjunction with so many of these protocols we're hearing about, and they're complementary. They're not going to affect it negatively in any way. They bring balance to the protocols. They bring harmony and homeostasis. So it's important because they bathe these guys, right? And then when you want to get inside the cell, you can look at the biocell formulas. You can look at the E-energy for the mitochondria, the VISTA, and so on. All very critical here. But again, it is just a cell, and it has all the same things that all the other cells do. The DNA, the mitochondria, the proteins, the receptors. So when you think about the brain, don't try to make it more complicated than it needs to be, even though I did, and I had a mini panic attack. So today, neurotransmitters. Again, neurotransmitters are a really important way of keeping the brain healthy. They're moving information. They're moving, and again, I used that analogy yesterday. If you're not using your muscle, if you're not using your immune system, it's going to atrophy. Neurotransmitters allow the nervous system not to atrophy. Okay? It's important that we exercise these things. But what happens when you push them too hard or push them too low? We run into the problems that we're facing today. Some of it is environmental. I keep doing that. Some of it's environmental, as we mentioned a minute ago, but some of it's inherited. Right? Some of the people you guys are treating, they were born with this familial. They've inherited genes. You know, depression. We're getting better at looking at our material genetically, epigenetically, polymorphisms. We're understanding that, you know, a mother during the depression can, in fact, pass on some of those traits epigenetically to her child and her grandchild and so on and so forth. We have the Dutch studies done during World War II. The Dutch kept brilliant records of what the Dutch famine did to those people. And they can study epigenetically the impact. And it's different for their offspring, whether they're boys or girls, and it was different whether they followed the man that was in the famine or the woman, and then their offspring, right? It turned on different genes, and sometimes that starvation made some genes turn on that are good genes, right? The sirtuin genes, the genes that resveratrol affects, where it helps keep you more healthy and lean, and it keeps the insulin resistance down, which is why intermittent fasting works, right? That happened, and that can happen during these traumatic times for people, whether it's in Africa or World War II. However, it can also turn on genes that are not the genes you want to turn on or turn off. So we have a lot more data that's coming out. So there's the epigenetic, there's the genetic, environmental. We have all these things to worry about. It's overwhelming, I know, but we'll get through it. I promise. So in these, we have now looking at more inhibitory. We don't want to overstimulate the glutamates and the glutamines and we do want to deal with dopamine today, and we do want to deal with serotonin, but those are in the moderate levels. We don't need to worry about acetylcholine because again, those are all higher learning and so on, circadian rhythm. But we do want to deal with sensory. Sleep is important, but I'm not going to touch on that today. We had Dr. Pompa cover that nicely. Reward, mood, second brain, endocrine, and inhibitory. These are ones we want to keep in balance, and this does involve the HPA axis, right? So I threw this up here because it's important for us to think about this. We throw that word out a lot, at least I do, and we presume that's highly understood. And most of you do look at this and have seen this, models like this, and understand that, you know, adrenal stress, cortisol, the pituitary hypothalamus. But I want to go through this briefly to remind you to respect this system, because this system we're going to talk about today, but it's involved in many other aspects. And when you look at female endocrine or male endocrine, you know, we're going to revisit this system even when we're not talking about a neurological problem, right? because it's involved in many other aspects of our daily lives. So let's look at it. So we all know what the brain looks like, right? Happy brain. Right in here we have the hypothalamus. You can't see my little thing, but there it is. And over here we have the pituitary. And just in this one HPA axis, look, we release this hormone, right? Adrenocorticotropic hormone. It goes to the adrenal gland. Where's the adrenal gland located? Top of the kidneys, right? Then we go down here, and this now is going to release the glucocorticoid hormones. What's one of those? Cortisol. Thank you. We also have noradrenaline and adrenaline. These are actually important. Okay, we want to stimulate some of these with the calm, but what we don't want to stimulate is this, right? So the ingredients in calm are focused on one part of the adrenal gland, not the entire adrenal gland. Okay, because these are a low level of these are good at help boosting your mood, good at making you overcome anxiety. Just a little bit, right? Because anxiety is going to come at you daily, right? Whether it's through you're behind schedule or you're in a traffic jam or what have you. Anxiety is going to come at you. Stress is going to come at you. A little bit of these guys will help you get through that. So we want to have a little bit of that going on. We're not going to worry about the growth hormone, but these are all important because look at what these do. One of their main functions is to go over and talk to our immune system. So the scary part of this is that and I think Dr. Pompa mentioned this, when you're in chronic adrenal fatigue or adrenal override, what's the system you're now impacting quite a bit? This guy. We don't want to do that, do we? I mean, what's one of the most scary words you guys have in your practice? Autoimmune. That is scary. When a low level of chronic inflammation escalates to autoimmune, okay, your work just got 100 times harder. Okay? The work for you to bring that person back to health got so much harder when you involve the immune system. The immune system is brilliant, but we are messing with our immune system with so many bad things in our world and our diet that when we do this, when we elicit this autoimmune response, one of the things the immune system has a memory. Okay? A great memory, right? We've got the innate. It's going to remember things. So when you may have subsided your immune system, as soon as that immune system sees something again that triggered it in the first place, it's going to remember it and it's going to turn on really quickly. Now, from an infection standpoint, that was a great thing for us, right? When we were hunter-gatherers, or even when we were, those of us that were in the United States, when we were coming across the plains and we were coming in contact with new things, whether we were explorers and finding new, it was a wonderful thing because once you expose yourself to it, the next time you saw it, not a problem. The memory kicked in, you had all the immune ability to produce the antibodies, the macrophages, they took care of it. You didn't even notice you got it the second time. So the memory's great in that instance, but when you create an autoimmune system and you trigger that memory, now your immune system is attacking you. That's what autoimmune is, right? It's killing your own tissue. Celiac, it's the lumen of their gut and their brain, right? Two things that it recognizes in autoimmune. And there's many other cases, so I think I've beat that point, but we really want to take care of this guy because when it malfunctions, we are not happy. You've seen this before. Another reminder, norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine. These are the three focal points because, again, they're involved in our life and our happiness and our emotions and so on. And they're really quite beautiful. It's an elegant system, and nobody on this planet could have developed it. We're lucky that we can understand it, right? It's an amazing, elegant system. Again, I know I tell you guys that every time, but the more you look at your body, the more you look at what I call the science of our body, the more spiritual and amazing it becomes. It's so many orders of magnitude because you're looking at what you're not reading in a book, you're not hearing a story, you're not being told. You're looking at what it is, what we are, what we're about. And that is just amazing at a level that is almost incomprehensible, right? It's looking inside your body is like looking at the creation of the universe. It's that complex. And I know you guys can't comprehend that. I know I can't comprehend the billions of light years that we have from planet to planet, star to star, solar system to solar system. I mean, that's an amazing, amazing thing. Your body has so many amazing things that are just like that. So it's just a really deep respect for these things. And on top of that, it's enjoyable, right? Your life can be enjoyable when you're in health and when you're in good relationships and when you have great family and friends. What's better, right? Except sitting right here. No, I'm kidding. That's definitely better than sitting right here. But really, all these things that bring happiness, it's wonderful. Synapse. This is to remind you that a lot of things that go into calm, that went into nursing yesterday, we're really focused in on the cell, we're focused on the synapse because we want the behavior of this communication to be really, really congruent. We want it to be balanced. We want it to be fulfilled. We want it to have all the things it needs, all the nutrients, all the receptors, everything they need to concentrate on this, right? Again, this is one you've seen. We have the cell, and then it's axion. And again, it's an elegant little system. Now, I mentioned yesterday about the minerals here. And that's one of the things that is just coming out. Now, I know you guys have probably seen this, and I haven't had my head in a book a lot in the last 30 days. However, the little I did, there's new blood pressure medications that are out, and now they're combining them, right? So now they're taking two heart medications like pressure and cholesterol and combining them. Do you know what it does to this process right here? It depletes you of remember I told you the neurotransmitters set off the signal, but then you need all the minerals. You need the calcium in that to perpetuate the signal, right? It's called the threshold, and then it perpetuates that electrical conduction, right, at the speed of light so that you can see something, it goes to your brain, and you can act, right? Or you can put your hand on a fire and pull your hand away because your brain tells you to. Those drugs are impacting those exact biological processes. So people going on those particular types of drugs, the Lipitor, all the blood pressure, and now they're combining it with, I just said it, draw a blank, cholesterol, they're going to be suffering consequences. Yeah, I didn't take my Neurosin this morning, I can tell you that. This is a problem for them, and it is going to lead them into early dementia. It's going to lead them into early anxiety. So those of you that are seeing those people, have a heart-to-heart with them, because that is now a published scenario, not a theory, not a hypothesis. And this is where it's happening. It's happening right there in these neurotransmissions. You get atrophy, then your body wants to come in and prune the nerves. So when you start to not use nerves in your brain and in your central nervous system, one of the things that the astrocytes and the glial cells are responsible for is they're going to start pruning these things. They're going to start cutting back the dendrites, the axions, because there's no need to have all this extra stuff around because you have to maintain it. It's like having too big of a house for yourself, right? You have to clean rooms you don't even enter. That's what your brain says. I don't need all these cells, these neurons, if I'm gradually shutting them down. They're going to go in and prune them. And I can promise you, rebuilding them is a lot harder than keeping them happy to begin with, right? We do talk about neurogenesis, but it is not an overnight process, nor is it high fidelity. We don't know where we can and cannot complete neurogenesis. So keep them alive. Make sure they're happy. Okay, moving along. Mood dysfunctions. Again, we can qualify these however you want. These are taken straight out of various literatures, but we have depressed mood, anxiety, chronic stress, sleep deprivation, obsessive compulsive behavior, bipolar person. And there's the litany of lists is just huge. There are some deeper work in these areas, brain scans and emotional work and meditation that is really able to branch some of these out into even details. So, I mean, I didn't realize that some of these can branch out into more and more detail, which is quite impressive, and I didn't really realize that until people that treat these, have large clinics that deal with these, have more detail than I could even imagine about how people are behaving and what they're doing for it, right? And it is a full-on approach, a lifestyle approach, not just nutrition. So to understand it a little bit, right, we definitely I think we all agree it's connected to brain health. There's overwhelming amounts of evidence that people that suffer brain damage, brain trauma, toxic brain, mercury, and so on, they're going to, and I don't want to call it a side effect, but they're going to experience what we're talking about today, the anxieties, the stress, the panics, right? So it's a consequence in many cases of that. It's also a consequence of gut damage, right? We talked about that. That can be a consequence because the feedback, you open up the blood-brain barrier, now those toxins zip in there, right? They may have taken a long time to get in there before, but you open it up, they're going to be zipping in there every time you take a bite of that McDonald's hamburger or whatever. We have neurotransmitter imbalance. That's something we really focused on today, so I'm not going to beat that up anymore. Membrane and receptor dysfunction. The amygdala, that's a really fun one because that keeps cropping up, and we didn't really give it much thought. It's one of the things we've known about it is it's fear, right? It's one of the fight or flight. So in the brain, it responds quickly, and it goes through the HPA Axis, and it helps tie memories as well, and anxiety memories, and stressful memories. Sends them into the hippocampus, and then out into the cerebrum to be stored, right? So the amygdala is central. It's just off the spinal cord. We know it's an important part of our brain, but if you damage it or if you continually chronically stimulate it with these anxiety and fears, they start to map. And just like you've seen these neurons, you can map these neurons, right? The more you trigger, and I should have said this yesterday, but why do we do, and Cynthia's going to have fun with brain games, but what do we tell our kids when they're learning? Repetition, practice, 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 right? Muscle memory, brain muscle memory. That repetition. What happens, now that's a wonderful thing, right? Those of you that are athletes, skiers, pianists, violinists, dancers, that repetition really solidifies these synapses from the fingertip all the way to the brain, and it really connects them, and it connects them forever. You know, it's like riding a bike. You'll never forget how to ride a bike because you've created this permanence to that activity. Okay, and that's a wonderful phenomenon. We love that phenomenon, especially athletes and those of us that have passions that we want to get good at. However, what happens when we solidify a stressful phenomenon, an anxious phenomenon, a panicked phenomenon, and we keep repeating it? And pretty soon, that now has been reinforced over and over and over again. And I don't want to go to the wrong place, but now we're getting into abuse and other things that are really, really scary because, Stockholm Syndrome, you've now created a connection, a synapse that is permanent, and it's really hard to back that back down. It's possible, but it's really hard. So, again, reinforcing the positive, reinforcing the nutrition, reinforcing the good lifestyle, and the emotional, spiritual, we can bring those back down and make those synapses weaker, and eventually, hopefully, they'll atrophy. But that's really, it's something that is, nutrition has a role in that. So endocrine, cortisol, we just talked about. The xenobiotics, I've talked about the inflammation, both really low levels, chronic and acute, and the second brain. So there are a lot of repetitive that we want to worry about. So let's talk about symptoms. Later today, we're going to do a case study. And again, the symptoms, this is a snapshot of what could be 20 pages, right? And everybody experiences things differently. So my intent isn't to give you the best or the ones that are the most important. This is a snapshot. I've seen questionnaires. I've seen computer. In fact, Hank brought me in some really fun questionnaires. There's lots of ways to assess people in your clinic, and I know a lot of people take advantage of the questionnaires and the face-to-face understanding what's going on with your patients. These are some of the questions that people ask, and there's ways to dissect these questions in questionnaires. They're available from many, many sources. I'll show you one a little bit later here I just picked it because it would fit on a slide. Some questionnaires are 10 pages long, right? Tremors, hands and feet, compulsive decisions, unresolved headaches, unexplained body aches. Now, as you guys look at these, okay, I'm talking about the brain and what to do about stress and anxiety, but you guys should immediately start recognizing there's a lot of other sources for these things, right? Which may be the causation to what I'm talking about. You guys could go deeper into what started this. It may not have started in the brain. In my talk, I'm presuming that everything starts here for my talk purposes, but it may have started somewhere else entirely. And I know that because this one right here, headaches, there are a lot of people, again, that I've been around that there's a lot of etiology here that you have to look at carefully. Body aches, you've got fibromyalgia and so on, inability to concentrate for a long time, fainting spells. As you can see, there's a lot of ways to come at this as a healer. Sweating episodes, disturbed sleep patterns. Some of these, I think, when I pulled this list really quickly, the brain scans that were being heavily done were being done on PTSD people. So I know some of these were related to PTSD because right now, our country is being flooded by PTSD people, right, as we're calling people back. It's overwhelming, and I don't know if you guys have any of those in your practice, but it's like a sub-epidemic, I guess, is what you'd want to call it. Tens and thousands of people have been over there exposed to things that we can't even imagine. I can't imagine. In fact, I close my eyes if when you see some of the footage of things that are happening over there, ISIS and all that craziness. Well, these young men and women were exposed to that in real life. So I think some of this came from there. Okay, so let's look at a healthy brain and unhealthy brain. There's lots of different, this is called a SPECT scan. There are many other scans. There's MRI scans, and they're really fun, and they're informative, and they're going to teach us more. They are not the end-all, be-all, though. Remember, any kind of tests we talk about are not the end-all, be-all. They are a tool in your tool belt, okay? You need multiple tools. So here's a healthy brain. Here is an unhealthy brain. Now, this unhealthy brain, this happens to be anxiety/depression brain, okay? But let me tell you that if you look at SPECT scans, and these are now available all over the internet, if you look at one where someone's on meth, it's even worse than this. Someone that has had a stroke, the bottom part, wherever the stroke is, let's say this stays really smooth and clear like this one, and then you have this huge gaping hole where the stroke happened in the SPECT scan. Or there's a tumor, or there's, and they do have these scans on things like OCD and ADD, and the reason that they can do that is because those, however we want to classify them, there is an impact on the brain. It changes blood flow, it changes oxidative damage, and that's what you're looking at here. These are areas where that brain, those neurons, are no longer behaving like neurons. In fact, they might be dead, they might be damaged, they might be lacking oxygen, the mitochondria could be shut down. There's lots of reasons for these holes, but these holes, bottom line, these holes are not a good thing. They're literally holes in your brain, okay? The good news is, can we reverse these things? We can. And we don't need Ritalin, Adderall, Lipitor. We don't need any of those things to do it. Yay. That's right, someone said yay. So what are some of the statistics? These are the most common mental illnesses, anxiety disorders, in the US, affecting 40 million adults. And those are just people that have submitted to it, to say, hey, I think I have this, right? How many people don't actually go in and become part of that statistic? It's probably much higher. This is always low statistics. Adults in the 18 and older, anxiety disorders cost the US more than $42 billion a year. Money is always important because money drags down the things we need to do. Money makes our life harder. When we spend a lot of money on the wrong things, we don't have the money to do the right things, right? Anxiety disorders develop from a complex set of risk factors. These are things we've talked about today, and this is a growing area. The brain is a growing area, thank goodness. We finally turned our attention to it. So it'll be good for all of us in the end. So again, natural opportunities abound. We can look at our membranes, our receptors, the herbs and how they relate to genes and enzyme cofactors. You guys saw this yesterday. I'm going to keep coming back to this. This is Herbalomics. This is good nutrition. This is good diet. This is good emotional health. We have opportunities. These opportunities are like nobody else's. We have these opportunities in you guys' world. You have opportunities. I just want to help you with these opportunities. So, Calm itself. What is Calm all about? Mood health. See, I'm being legal. Okay. Serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine balances improve brain exercises, increase enzyme activity, and decrease oxidative stress. So it is a different approach. So Calm is very different from Neurosyn, and it's different from nerve and brain, okay? And the one thing that I got asked today, and I think a lot of it, as Dr. Curtola and Dr. Pompa mentioned, that we have the insults from outside, right? The toxic insults. Some of those being metals. I've been asked at least 3 times by people, hey, what are Systemic's approach to detoxification, especially chelation detoxification? Well, let me try to give you a quick summary. So we have what are called gentle chelators, right? Cleanse and REL. They're gentle chelators. They're not really aggressive, so they can be used longer term. They can be more balancing. They're not going to go straight into and start grabbing those heavy metals. They're more long-term and more gentle. I know a few people in I don't know in this audience, but they do have to go that soft route because the hard route hurts. You know, they get Herxheimer reactions. But most importantly, we have another one called bind. It doesn't get into the bloodstream, but bind is part of the IDS. It binds things like nobody's business. Those of you guys that were at when we launched bind, I took a jar of heavy metal liquid. Right? So I have heavy metals in the lab. I have everything. Well, I took heavy metals that you wouldn't even imagine that you see, and we don't test for them. But there are a lot of heavy metals. Look at the periodic table that can invade your environment in your world. So anything from aluminum to cadmium, zinc, titanium, mercury, zircon, et cetera, right? Palladium. I poured that into what was equivalent to about 6 capsules of powder. Okay? And then I took that powder. Actually, I didn't do it. Charlie did it. Charlie's in the lab. And Allie. But I was there. And then we put that powder onto a filter, so it trapped the powder, but all the liquid came out, right? And what was in the liquid? No more heavy metals. So we know that binds heavy metals. Okay? And it also binds organic things, but that's a different test. So that did happen. So there's a really good one for heavy metals. However, it tends to stay in the GI tract when you eat it. But remember, it is a strong chelator. So if you're taking, you need your min, you need your PTM, and other things, your multis and your spectra, when you're doing that, and there are metals in there, don't do it at the same time. And that's, Dr. Pompa learned that years and years ago in his groups with these kinds of formulations. So separate them because they will trap everything, anything and everything. And that's true for the organic side, but again, that's more a different time. And then the ALA. We use a lot of ALA. You'll find it throughout the new formulations, right? We use it a lot. And we even have a proprietary ALA called zinc alpha lipoate. It's called zinc alpha lipoate. So we've partnered zinc with the alpha lipoate. Now it comes off when you digest it so that you get the free zinc. But we've partnered it because we like what they do together. And really, I think we're the only place you can get it. We make it at Systemic. It's really fun. It's really simple, in fact, when you combine the two. It's a really cool little deal. And it makes the lipoate a little more bioavailable because the way lipoate is, you have to tie up. Now that it has a buddy, a partner, it's not as hard to work with during the digestive process. So that's, again, another time, kind of boring, sorry. That's all. But the rest of Calm, okay, here's what we're targeting. Hello? Okay, so we want to have nutrients for, again, we have our genetic component, we have our oxygenation. This one's important. Increased mitochondrial output. There are some limiting factors, things in our brain that we don't get enough of nutrient-wise, right? Yesterday it was phosphatidylserine for cognitive. There are others, and we'll show those in a second. Neurogenesis, not as much neurogenesis, but a little in this one, because we're focused really on norepinephrine, GABA, dopamine, and serotonin. And of course, we want to take care of our membranes every single time. So that goes without saying. You guys have heard of some of these. L-theanine. We have a lot of adaptogens from Ayurveda. So if you look up here, rhodiola and others, there's some unique things like S-adenosylmethionine. This guy right here is the reason we put it in the capsule we did. Because if you don't have it protected, it's sensitive, it'll die, right? It gets destroyed by the GI. So that's why it's in a capsule that makes it past the stomach. We've got some herbs, graphonia, we've got mucuna, we've got Ziziphus spinosa, scledium. These are, you look at some of these are really fun and novel. These again are the Chinese and the Ayurveda. They're more exciting, they're not as well known yet, but what is known is amazing about them. So again, if you are label readers, you can see some really fun things. Same thing here, Centella is well known, it's been around a long time, but Polygala isn't. And again, it's a unique one that we have found for these types, for this product. So although, like I said yesterday, this is a high-value product, there's nothing else like it on the market. Its core existence, by the way, was Grandpa's formula, NC. So it started from Grandpa, just so you guys know. And we've expanded upon NC with this, okay? So this is the new Calm. So we have the core that we've built off of. These are all the building. I haven't put his back on the original NC because I just wanted to show you the new ones. You guys are familiar with the original stuff. But we've built off of that, and we built off that with the same idea, the same spirit to get some really amazing things in there that people don't know about and that have the energy and the ethnobotany and the history in the world of healers over a long period of time. Science has just proven those connections again, old to new. Well, one of the things we want to do is receptor sensitization. You guys have heard of this. What other issue do we have where receptors are a problem? And what binds to that receptor? Okay. We've talked about it here in these intensives, and all those are some new faces. It should still be fairly fresh in your mind. There is another problem we have as an epidemic in our population that involves receptors. There's many, but there's an easy one. What is it? Pardon? Yeah, even more common than that. Type 2, insulin resistance. That's a receptor issue, right? There are others. You guys were all right. I was just thinking of that one, so I said you're wrong just because it was my answer I was thinking of, not yours. But there's another receptor issue. So again, this is a reoccurring theme. Receptors are a reoccurring theme, and I know you've been taught that before, but I'm reiterating. Receptors are important. They are a communication. They're not just the communication with synapses. They're the communication with everything. Every hormone in your body that we need and use and take advantage of has a receptor. Plants have receptors. That's what makes them so cool. Guess what receptors do? Receptors talk to our DNA. That's really what they're for. They communicate to the center of the cell so the cell can say, hey, what does this cell need? The receptor says it needs this protein, or it needs this, or it needs that. That's what receptors do. They transfer their information down into the nucleus so that you can produce what you need. Whether it's more mitochondria, whether it's more vitamin D uptake in the stomach. Receptors do that for you. So the receptors are, again, a pivotal, critical piece of what we do. This product took that into consideration, again, because we want to improve synapse response. We want to increase all of these things. Now, in this particular case, the reason we do this is because we know for anxiety, depression, panic disorders, the receptors are one of the central problems in that area. When we look at receptor function, it's terrible in these people. Those holes in the brain you saw, largely related to receptor issues. That's why I'm pointing this out. Okay, so receptors are critical, and we know that receptors, because some people can produce enough serotonin, but when they've destroyed their receptors, it doesn't matter anymore, right? It doesn't really matter. We're coming down to the end, ladies and gentlemen. Influence the synapse of enzymes. So changes in the synapse of enzymes leads to changes in neurotransmitters. One of the other parts of this, so we've got reuptake. Now this ought to trigger a memory for you guys. You got, what's a SSRI? Right? Serotonin reuptake inhibitor. There's also norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors that are being prescribed. I don't know if you guys knew that. And there are others. What does that mean? I want you to envision a synapse, okay? And I'm going to draw one for you. Here's a synapse. Okay? Oh man, I goofed up the left side. So right here next to the synapse, we have helper guys. And yesterday I told you, and I'm not going to draw them very well, These are glial cells. In fact, these are the astrocytes. You guys remember that? How I told you there's more of these guys than anything else? These guys have reuptake portals. So when you have serotonin released and it floods this center of the synapse to send your signal down to your brain or out to your limbs, well, you don't want the neurotransmitters to sit in here forever because now the neuron won't work. So these guys help take these back up and get them out of the way for the next transmission, for the next piece of information to travel. Right? They clear it out again, make it clean. Well, they have transmitters that take up the epinephrine, the adrenaline, the serotonin, the dopamine. When you blunt those with drugs, what does that do? It leaves the serotonin, all those things in here. It leaves it on. Right? You get this chronic firing. Well, we don't need to do that. We just need to make everything in this synapse healthier. We need to make everything healthier here, and you don't need these things to blunt and interfere, right, with a normal biological process. That's what I mean by those things. So getting back to that. There are also, in this same synapse, okay, I don't know if you guys knew this, but also secreted in these synapses are enzymes. And a lot of times they're attached. But guess what they do? They destroy the neurotransmitters, right? They chew them up, just like an enzyme chews up your food. There's little enzymes in these synapses, right here, that destroy the neurotransmitters. Again, so you can recharge, so that your synapse is healthy and ready to go again. Turns out that things in our ancient diet, vis-a-vis therapeutic herbs, already help your synapses do this. They already help these enzymes. They help these glial cells, the astrocytes. They're already there. They exist in nature. We didn't need to try to go around it in a weird way. Larger vesicle release, when you create the information to send down the synapse, the larger the vesicle, the greater the synapse potentiates the deal. So this gets really complicated, but inside the cell, we want to nourish. And what I mean by that is the more we can give precursors to these neurotransmitters, the tyrosines, the 5-hydroxytryptophans, the precursors to building these neurotransmitters, and the cofactors to help build them. I got to write this out. Sorry. I'm going to show you guys this because I was going to gloss over it, but it's important for both neurosyn and calm. Okay? Sorry. You guys are going to get more biochemistry than you ever dreamed of. In our neurotransmitter, and the reason I'm telling you this is the brilliance of your body, but it's also the brilliance of nature to help us do what we need to do. Okay, so the neurotransmitters are stored in little vesicles, okay? Little tiny spheres, just like cholesterols are stored in LDL molecules, same idea. They're little spheres that store your neurotransmitters, okay? And they look like this. And inside, we have our little neurotransmitters, okay? The neurotransmitters have to merge with this membrane, right? So they merge with this membrane, and that allows these neurotransmitters to be released into the synapse. Then they come over here, and they bind to the receptor to send the signal, okay? There's the process in a nutshell. The larger and the more healthy you can make these vesicles. Boy, it sounds a lot like LDL, doesn't it? The larger we can make these vesicles to carry these neurotransmitters, the better your signal is transmitted. What impacts some of the size of these vesicles is having the right nutrients to build these neurotransmitters inside the neurons. So when we lack the proper nutrition, we don't build these neurotransmitters in the volumes we need to, and then we don't have these little vesicles that are big enough to really help improve that signal or send that signal. So we want the things to help to build bigger volumes of these. And then the body takes care of the rest. It knows when to send them, okay? And the cool thing is this all happens, again, I'm going back to how cool your body is. This all happens in about 100 to 200 milliseconds. All this. So everything I've just drawn happens in a tenth of a second to send the signal. How cool is that? But that's important because the things in calm and neurosyn, in fact, are helping us build more neurotransmitters in these vesicles so that we don't have to try so hard to get to get our neurons happy. That's the idea. And again, that's not my discovery. That's a discovery that scientists are looking at these plants that we've known have helped in anxiety and looking how do they work. Why has this Chinese plant worked to reduce anxiety for the last 5,000 years? Ta-da. This is how some of these things are working. It's brilliant. And then we recover from brain damage. That, part of that, that's a dual. So some of these products, Neurosyn and Calm, can be used together in some of your cases, there's no doubt. All right. This is our other little chart. I'm going to come back to it one more time today. So nutrition and herbalomics, which is where I've spent a lot of my time, socialization and support, physical activity, mental stimulation, and spirituality. This little pie chart is important. You can make your own pie chart, you can add things to it, you can take things away. However, when you are working with somebody, either with cognitive and or today's anxiety, please look at all these different factors. I don't think I did that one. I did not push the button. So please keep that in mind because that's an important element of this. And you know what? It makes the nutrition, if for no other reason that you take the pie chart, if for no other reason, it'll actually make what I'm telling you today better, okay? If you just do this, you may not have the success you want. That doesn't make me happy because now you're going to come back to me and say, this did nothing for my patients. Remember, it takes a community, right, to raise a child. It takes more. See, and that's happy dance music. So it takes a lot, guys, and I don't want what we give you to fail ever because you need to incorporate into other things, and this is just a simple pie chart. Could be a lot more. So here's the questionnaire I told you about. I just grabbed this because it would actually fit on a slide. This is about as simple as they can come. Why am I showing you this? Because now there are other tools. There are tools beyond, what we have that I know you guys employ every day. I wanted to show an example that when you use a questionnaire, you can pull things out of people. You can start dialoguing. Like I said, Dr. Hank gave me a much more intensive one this morning to show me what he uses, and it's beautiful. It's a wonderful thing. This is just very simple. But even something this simple can create a dialogue that you may not have otherwise started with. Here's an example. So those of you that do practice functional medicine, I wanted to see, and I didn't put that in there, but this is just straight off of Labrix's website, okay? Because I haven't actually I've sent neurological analyses in, but we were working with Ian, we sent them in for a different reason. This one happens to be focused on anxiety, and I wanted to see what it looked like. And in fact, when you look at this and read the bottom, and let me read these to you. Low GABA may be associated with anxiety, worry, poor motor control or impulse activity, and decreased sleep. Low dopamine is associated with difficulty concentrating, decreased libido, may be associated with increased addiction. And it goes on, but it fits what we're talking about, right? It fits the things that we're talking about today. Now, it's a snapshot. Okay, there's the downside of any lab testing. It's a moment in time. Remember that. Again, it's just a tool, but it's a moment in time. And there are ways to have much greater exposure to your patients as well, beyond this. But I just wanted to see if the world at large who is doing these tests were coming to some reasonable conclusions in their data. And it turns out, I'm glad to say it, they are, right? I did the same thing with heavy metal testing. Different labs we looked at, and some are better than others, to be honest. So we did that too. But in this case, let's see, elevated glutamate is associated with anxiety. So we don't want glutamate, those excitatory ones, high. That is not a good thing. Those are pushing the stress up, right? And I think, who mentioned that yesterday? Dr. Klum did. Dr. Klum mentioned that. Yeah, and that's true. So if you see in our Neurosyn, what we did was we used alpha-ketoglutarate. We didn't use very much, but we used that because it doesn't do the same thing. It has a different pathway to the end result. It doesn't drive glutamate up. The one phenomenon around all these amino acids that nobody knows the answer to, okay, it's beyond the scope of our understanding, is how does your body create the separate pools? How does it create a pool of glutamate that is used to build protein? Because you use a ton of it in building protein. and other things, versus the pool that it segregates out to use as a neurotransmitter, because it's just an amino acid. That's an amazing process that nobody even really knows yet. Same thing's true for tyrosine, tryptophan, and so on. We don't know how your body separates out and makes those decisions. Those are conscious decisions that it makes. So the idea between this, I just want to show you guys that, at least in this case, and I know there are others that I found where there is some really good correlation for those of you that use functional medicine. It's not. It has some good support, right? And those of you who use it could say, well, duh, I get that. But I wanted to see it for myself. I'm just that kind of person. Gut-brain connection, I think we beat the heck out of that. I'm not going to spend too much more time on that. This is just a fun starting point. I know we're going to do a lot more, and Dr. Pompa went through a bunch. But I wanted to highlight a few things. I didn't do time of day or anything like that. Dr. Pompa covered that. But I wanted to this was a reminder slide for those of you that need to go back to your office on Monday and start protocoling, right? And you're going to be learning from Jack. You've learned from Dr. Pompa. What I just want to remind everybody is that CALM, GA, GB, and N3, and I think Dr. Pompa covered those today. I don't recall if N3 was in there, but N3, and it was? Right on. N3 is a brilliant, if you look at N3, N3 is the identical twin to CALM with all the other characteristics, okay? CALM is athletic, N3 is the nerd, okay? So it has all the things that we couldn't put into CALM. So together, they cover everything. And the brilliance of it is, I didn't even know that. When we were looking at CALM, we were looking at this, we started looking at N3 and thought, wow, Grandpa, right? He's got some things in there that predate the modern knowledge of what they do, right? They predate that. N3 goes back to before our understanding of what these things are doing. So N3 was those moments where you're looking at something that somebody did, and you're like, those aha moments, like, oh, that's the little nugget of brilliance. N3 was that, for me at least. For Grandpa, I was like, wow, that was really cool what he did. And I had no idea. Because N3 isn't something that flies off our shelves like it should, right? It should be something that is in high demand, and it really hasn't been. It's really been kind of a sleeper for us. And so I hadn't thought much about it. When we looked at it, I thought, that little guy is such a perfect little thing. And it has everything that CALM needs that you can't put in the CALM capsule. So those two together, really great results you should get, no doubt. But for me, it was a light bulb moment. Secondary stuff I put in there just as part of our dialogue. Just reminders, because I want you guys in the end, we did the biochemistry, do all the fun, we get to hear the stories, but in the end, you have to take something back to your office. So definitely think about protocoling. This is a caveat. This is a caveat that I always have these caveats when we interact with you guys from systemic, because a lot of your patients are on drugs, right? So we're always worried about the impact of a natural product and a drug. And some of these herbs are highly therapeutic, highly potent, so it is always a consideration. No more than now, it's now as important as it ever was with these products, because the drugs that we've already mentioned, that Dr. Pompa, yes, there can be an impact. So please, these caveats are not to be taken lightly. In fact, one of our customers, when I was interacting, talking to him about CALM and Neurosin, he's an energy healer, and he uses applied kinesiology as his tool, his modality. However, when I was on the phone with him, he goes, there's one exception, Shane. Whenever I'm treating people with depression or dangerous levels of anxiety where I don't know how they're going to respond, I do also incorporate into that lab testing. Because if I see their glutamate or their serotonin drop precipitously, I don't want them doing something that I didn't want them doing. I don't want them doing something dangerous. And that was an eye-opener for me. I thought, why would he do that? But that's his explanation. I've heard others since. So I wanted to put this in here. Natural products can be highly therapeutic, and they must be managed carefully when they're being co-administered. And as you know, this is an important topic, but it has more emotional impact than when you're dealing with, a fungus of you're dealing with athlete's foot, right? The implications are so much greater for the brain than it is something else you're treating, like a an infection of, the toenail, let's say. It's kind of a simple analogy, but I wanted to be a little bit shocking. But I want to thank you guys all, everyone, because this is the last time I'm up here. And it's very wonderful for me to be here. It's humbling, especially when we try to cover so much in a short period of time. I've enjoyed this, and I'm hoping that you guys will give us feedback and that you enjoyed our weekend. And I want to invite you all to Sunshine, because Sunshine, a little lighter fare, right? Not so intense, and you can have fun. And one of the things that we always encourage here and at Sunshine is networking. How many of you have already started networking, talking about cases? 3 or 4 people have come to me and said, hey, I've had this or this. That's brilliant. That in itself are the things you can take back to work on Monday. Okay? So the networking, the camaraderie, and Sarika and I were talking yesterday. We have a commonality that brings us together. You may want to come for the knowledge, you may want to come for the business, you may want to come for the practice, but honestly, I think one of the reasons that we keep finding ourselves together is because we have a shared mission or a shared goal, right? We believe in the same things, we have the same missions, we understand what it's like to improve your health in a way that's good for the planet, in a way that's good for the community, in a way that's good for the person. I love the planet. I don't know about you guys, but I miss the looking at, being outside, and we've even been cold all winter. We don't get outside. But there's a commercial that comes on that I was watching on, someone had their computer screen on, and I don't even know what it is. But I looked over because I couldn't help it. It started out with an orangutan standing next to a dog. Okay? So I'm at work, and someone has it on their computer, and I look over because it caught my eye. I love animals, especially little animals, especially when they're anthropomorphic. They act like us. So you have this orangutan standing next to it, and then it clips into I think it's like a baby horse running next to a rhino, and they're playing, right? A baby rhino and a baby horse. And then you have a lion and a bear rubbing each other. I mean, how cool is that? And it ends up with the orangutan doing the whole dead drop thing, And I have no idea what it's about, but it reminded me that we're surrounded by so many wonderful things, you guys, the animals, the plants, and this is what allows us to enjoy that. It allows us to really enjoy what we have around us. And life is short, right? That's a cliche, but I tell you what, life is short, so enjoy. Thanks. Oh, questions.
Questions. Okay, so we have some time for some questions.
Hey, that was great. And N3 does fly off of my shelves. I just wanted you to know that.
Oh, good.
Yeah. You were talking about how Calm will upregulate norepinephrine and downregulate glucocorticoids. Did I hear that right?
That's an extreme use. The raw materials that are being used in the Calm, one of them supports the production of norepinephrine. It does not support the production of cortisol.
All right.
So what happens is if it's not going to upregulate, it's going to support norepinephrine, epinephrine, but there's nothing in Calm to increase levels of cortisol.
Will that impact at all the work that we're doing to decrease inflammation?
Will impact? Yeah, so there's a lot of anti-inflammatory components, yes.
The other question I have is that I get a certain amount of side effect from SAMe, GABA, and DHEA. I'm really careful with those when I give them to people. In your testing, did you do much testing on people to see what kind of
We
side
have
effects you
only
were
had, it's only been about 12 people over the last small group. Yeah.
Okay, so you really want some feedback from us.
We really want some feedback, yeah.
Okay.
I've heard a little bit about the GABA, but GABA is a tricky one, right?
Yes.
I mean, we talked yesterday about it. A lot of people, it's GI, right? It affects their GI is the side effect. And unless you have leaky gut or leaky brain, and that's one of the tests. I don't know if we talked about that, but somebody, I don't know what lab or who invented this, but they say that if you take high doses of GABA, and you feel the calming effects. Because GABA, the low doses we use typically, like in Calm, are to trigger the biochemistry of making more GABA, right? So we want to affect the feedback loop, because you really want to make it up here, right? You don't necessarily want to make it. I mean, you make it in other places, but this is where you want it in this particular case. But if people superdose GABA and then feel this calming, right now the working theory is that you've got leaky brain, that it gets in through your gut and it makes it into the bloodstream and goes into the brain, because the stuff you took shouldn't necessarily have that dramatic of an impact on your brain, right? That's the working theory anyway.
Cool, over here.
Shane, I noticed maybe 2 slides back you had different protocols listed than you have in the book. You had a primary and secondary protocols. Can you put that back up for a second?
Yeah.
I didn't get to really see what that was.
And let me remind you guys, this was more of a talking point protocol. Okay, so there's elements of it that I think are absolutely necessary. So if I go back, so combining these 4, yeah, indeed. These are going to be like label amounts. These are things you're going to read on the label. It's nice to spread them out throughout the day. I think we talked about that, sometimes in the morning, sometimes at night, depending on your patient. The secondary I threw in there because I wanted you guys to think about, these are important because we're looking at the HPA axis. We already know about calm, we know about N3. But I want this to be the smallest starting point, right? This is the starting point. From this, you can add to it. And then you can also determine your own doses unless you want to use the label, but this is the simplest starting point. But again, this is only for the anxiety stress side, right? If you're dealing with someone that has demonstrated compulsive or addictive behaviors like ADHD and so on, you're going to have to add other things to this, right? You're going to have to look down into these other pieces. And if you know for a fact that they are constipated, and I think we mentioned this yesterday, and Hank can back me up on this, but constipation is a motility issue. It goes straight to the brain, right? That's the vagus nerve. That's the signal from the brain through the vagal nerve to the enteric system, telling those muscles, the motor neurons, right, to move the food. So if they're constipated, you know immediately that you're looking here, you're looking at the gut as well as the brain, right? That is one easy connection. There are many others, but that's an easy connection for people.
Over here.
But I also want you guys, during the STEPS program, you're going to have experts, you're going to have people in your groups. I want this to be a starting point, let's say, for dialogue. To say, well, here's what I do. Here's in my practice. You mentioned N3, right? Here's in my practice. Here's what I do. So you guys can really interweave some really good dialogue about protocoling, because that's what I want you to. That's why we do it the last thing the weekend, so that's what you take home, right? You can build off of some of the things we've presented.
Shane, based on your last statement and your caveat, I see a lot of patients who are on 2 and 3 antidepressants, anti-anxiety drugs. What do you suggest for dosage then because most physicians that I work with have no idea about herbs or whatever. They just say don't take them.
Yeah.
So if you're going to use these, then how would you suggest dosing them so that you can avoid these kind of interactions?
So it's a great question. And again, I want you guys to cover this in the steps, because I know many of you guys want to raise your hand and have input. But remember, do that in the steps. But real quick, from a company standpoint, we approach it very conservatively. Start low. Start low, because you don't want to drive, like I think over here she mentioned the GABA response. You don't want to drive an over-response to where you lose the confidence of the patient or you lose their compliance. So start low. And then ultimately, and this has worked for many people, and I've said this before, you can start a dialogue with whomever has them on those over time to make those adjustments. And you can supply, you guys, you can supply these doctors that are prescribing the prescriptions, the data. These ingredients are supported clinically now, right? You can say, read this publication. It was produced by a leader in your field that says that the ingredients in Calm or the ingredients in Neurosyn have great value equivalent to what you're on. So can we work on shifting the balance, going from your dose and my dose to my dose and your dose, right? But you definitely want to work with them on that compliance. But you now have tools that you can dialogue with them, and they can't just say, oh, that's crazy. No, it's not. It's real.
Okay, and we're over here now.
So in regards to alpha lipoic acid, taking the potential of it taking metals out of the brain, so that new zinc
Alpha lipoic?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still going to have, the characteristics of alpha lipoic acid are still going to be there. So you still have to be conscious of that. Yep.
One more question? Anybody else? Nope. Okay.
Right on. Thanks, everybody.
Give them a round of applause, everybody.